Okay, welcome back. So this is Pillar 2, Lecture 1. I would like to spend a few minutes giving you a quick review of Pillar number 1. Okay, so Pillar number 1, we raised the question, what is economics? So economics is the science of the struggle, economics is the study of humankind's struggle for survival. Survival is an innate, it's a natural drive in human beings. Richard Dawkins says that this is even at the genetically determined, right? So we are innately, instinctually, we're built for our quest for survival. Why is it a struggle? Why can't we just survive? Why is it a struggle? It's a struggle because of the scarcities of the world, right? The most important scarcity is time. We have other scarcities of the means that we like to achieve. We need food, we need energies of life. So it's a struggle because in the state of nature, in the outside world, in particular, time is scarce. The struggle doesn't occur in a vacuum. We don't struggle alone in isolation, but we struggle in the state of nature. Okay, so the state of nature, you can think about the environment outside, whether it's the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and other human beings with whom we have to interact in order to survive. So what is the starting point of our study? So economics is the study of humankind's struggles for survival. But where do we start? Right? I mean, it's a study. Every study must start somewhere, and our starting point in this case is that human beings act. Okay? In order to survive, we have to act. Okay, so action is innate. In order to survive, we have to act. So human action, Mises calls human action the axiom of action or the principle of action. It's axiomatic. Okay, this is a fundamental fact. It is a principle that human beings act in order to survive. Uh, Human action takes place in the state of nature. The state of nature, Hobbes defines it as the external environment before societies or before society institutions, law, or any other societal institutions are formed. Obviously, conflict in the state of nature before the existence of any institutions leads to conflict. So conflict is inevitable without mechanism for cooperations. There are two schools of economic thought or philosophies. One of them says in order to cooperate peacefully without conflict, we need a centralized cooperation system. The centralized cooperation system was pioneered by Thomas Hobbes a few hundred years ago. He said life in the state of nature is nasty, brutish, and short. So in the state of nature, there is conflict, and he said that we need a centralized, strong central authority. We want centralized cooperation. John Locke similarly said people leave the state of nature and form social contracts. So people come together, they form some social contract understanding, they establish the state with limited powers to secure their rights. So you're giving away some of your rights in order to attain or to obtain security. So these are centralized this is centralized cooperation. There's another school of economic thought pioneered by Rothbard. He says, well, this is a decentralized cooperation. We don't need a central authority to organize our relationship. Murray Rothbard says markets and voluntary contracts regulate society without the state. Says in the marketplace, individual exchanging goods and services create their own contracts, their own institutions, and these market institutions will regulate society without institutionalized or without statist establishments or institutions. His argument is one of natural rights argument in support of decentralization. He says, well, human beings have the right, a natural right. They derive it from human nature. They derive it from natural law. So we don't want our rights to be aggressed against. So we want to we would like to have voluntary, a decentralized market system or voluntary contracts. David Friedman and he also pioneered this idea of a decentralized cooperation. He's advocated for a stateless society where law, courts, and security are all provided by competing firms. Well, his argument was one of efficiency. He said this system is more efficient. So it wasn't a moral and ethical argument, as Murray Rothbard argued, a natural rights argument. His argument for a decentralized social order or anarchism was one of efficiency. He said anarchy is more efficient. Decentralized society will be better off than a centralized one. For Murray Rothbard, it was more about you have the right to enter a voluntary, decentralized social system. Human action obviously takes place in the state of nature, but it is guided by human nature. So economics is the study of human action, right? In the external environment, there are two political or economic views of the external environment. How do we want to organize our cooperation? But this cooperation, whether it's a centralized cooperation or a decentralized cooperation, is guided by our human nature. Every action must be aligned with our human nature. Economics studies human action in the state of nature given human nature. Some of the characteristics of our nature is that we are biological, physiological. We need the energies of life to survive. We have the drive, innate drive for survival. Another important biological characteristics is reproduction. All species reproduce. There aren't any species that don't reproduce. We all age. All species age. Plant kingdom, animal kingdom, all species age. Aging, mortality, we all die, all species die. So these are what we call essentialist characteristics of human nature. Human beings also have nomological characteristics, which is these are evolutionary characteristics. Our cognitive capacity, for example, evolved about 50,000 years ago. Anatomically, we differentiated about 200,000 years ago, but abstract thought, language, planning, cooperation, these are about evolved 50,000 years ago. We call them nomological features, right? You can also think about the epicanthic fold of the inner eyelid, right? That's a nomological feature. You can think about bipedalism, that's a nomological feature, right? So human beings, we have essentialist and nomological features. And as a social scientist, we have to take that into consideration. We can't study demand and supply and human action and interaction without truly understanding what it means to be human. From this, the most important feature that we are able to derive is that given our characteristics and the scarcities in the state of nature, the most interesting outcome is that we are naturally and necessarily self-interested. Okay, so this is at the genetic level. Our genes thrive, they seek what we call homeostatic stability. It's an innate stability, and that translates into us human being seeking stability or survival. Because the state of nature is, there are scarcities, because time is scarce, right? That leads for human beings innately and necessarily to be self-interested. The human species will be wiped out if we weren't self-interested, okay? So self-interest is a guiding principle. But I would like to add that altruism, which is doing something good, is not mutually exclusive with self-interest. Doesn't mean you're self-interested, doesn't mean you don't have other people, okay? Because the duality of warm glow and cold flow. Warm glow is the feeling. The endorphins are released in your body. You feel good when you help your neighbors. You also get a cold flow if you see someone in a difficult situation. Right, you don't attend for his needs, right? So self-interest and altruism are not mutually exclusive. Specifically, altruism towards your community and your kin and your family, in particular your kids. It's a natural, it's instinctual. And where is that altruism coming from? Well, it's also genetic, right? The genes you want, once you pass on your genes, you really don't think when you have kids, parents, they don't think about like sacrificing their life for their kids. It's just instinctual. If I get to think about it, I wouldn't do it. Obviously, I want to live too. But it's just instinctual. When you have kids, you'll feel that. So again, this is why. This is for the survival of your genes, right? So it's a survival. And then that altruism can go on to your tribe, family, to humanity, to the plant kingdom, animal kingdom, right? So it could expand. So altruism and self-interest are aligned with one another, and they're one and the same. Now, So the question I would like to raise is, in order to attain our goal, which is survival, right? Consumption of food, protection, housing, education, health, etc. Human beings can choose a market society, or they can choose isolation, do it alone. Okay, so you live in isolation with your friends, with your family, right? Small tribe, etc., or all alone, living an ascetic life. You can do it alone, but obviously, life is not prosperous if you are in isolation. You really can't produce all the goods and services that you're consuming, right? There are no benefits from the division of labor. Life is difficult, is short. Most likely, you will not survive. Or you can choose to do what? Enter society, a market society. Why do you enter society? Because of the benefits of the division of labor, because of specialization and trade. You can produce your t-shirt, you can exchange your t-shirts for shoes, right? You produce a security, you produce healthcare, so we enter society motivated by our self-interest because it is gainful. I don't enter society to benefit society. I enter society because it benefits me, right? So every economic activity now, once you enter society, human beings act. We cannot not act, right? We talked about the axiom of action in our pillar one. So human beings act. We cannot not act. So when you enter society, you have to act. Every action is purposeful. We don't act instinctually or randomly. We act with a purpose, right? Our purpose is to attain goals. So then every economic activity then, when we're acting, the first action when you enter society is to do what? Specialize. The second action after specialization is to do what? Trade, exchange the goods and the services. Now, trade is too costly in a barter system. Human beings discovered a medium of exchange, which is money, facilitates transactions, right? Also, human beings, in order there is no fraudulent activities to make sure that they don't lose all the apples that they're exchanging for bad bananas, right? Human beings discovered institutions, market institutions. The first fundamental market institutions were assurance and insurance institutions, insurance institutions. Also, human beings discovered banking institutions to facilitate exchange. Human beings also discovered jurisprudence, arbitration, and mediation institutions, right? To make sure that you're not taking risks are ameliorated, right? Human beings also discovered defense institutions to protect and defend you while you're engaging in market activity. All of this is, so if you realize in all of this, the fundamental is that human beings act. From the axiom of action, Ludwig von Mises was able to derive in 881 pages in his book titled Human Action, all the implications of human action. So he says human beings act, you cannot not act. But because we're volitional, right, action is not instinctual, it has a purpose. When it has a purpose, then we want to achieve goals. In order to achieve our goals, we don't want to do it alone, we want to enter market society. When we are at market society, direct implication of human action is that we specialize, and then we trade, and then we discover institutions of money, and then we discover other institutions, right, to make sure we're not taking risky exchanges, etc., etc. So all of these, all the institutions, the entirety of this program is based on the simple fact, right, an axiom, which is human action. So all this, we're going to trace its roots back to human action, okay? So every institution, when later on we're going to talk about institutions of jurisprudence, when it's security, when it's assurance, banking institutions, money, all of it could be traced back that human beings act, okay? So pillar number two, what we're going to do in pillar number two, number one, we're going to explore the method with which we study our struggle for survival, right? So we said human beings enter society, they struggle for survival, and we're going to investigate the method. So methodology is very important. How do we know what we know? Okay, so the methodology, in order to investigate human action, we're going to use a methodology with which we study our struggle. Number two, what was the first implication of human action? Is that human beings do what? They enter market society because it's more gainful over isolation, and they do what? They specialize and trade. Okay, so also today and tomorrow in this pillar, we're going to talk about specialization and trade. What determines what you specialize in? What determines what you specialize in? How does trade occurs? Okay, and then once we have the method with which we're going to study specialization and trade, then we're going to bring in the medium of exchange. Once I specialize, I want to come to trade, right? It's going to be difficult. I have bananas, I have apples, and I'm looking for bananas. You want my apples, but you don't have bananas, you have dates, right? So action will not take place. So I have to find someone, we call it the double coincidence of wants, is when you have to find someone who wants what you have and he or she has what I want, right? So it's so it's very difficult. Barter system is difficult. That's why money emerged in the marketplace to solve the problem, to facilitate the depth of exchange. Okay, so all of this emerged from human action, guided our human nature and our quest for survival. So let's talk about pillar number 2, the first topic, which is methods. So what is the method with which we study our struggle? How do we study our struggle? There are two general methods. How do we know what we know? How do we know what we know? There are two general categories. We either can do what? Observe. We can see. We can gather data. We can use econometrics, data analysis, statistics, mathematical modeling, right? We call that the scientific method. So the scientific method is you observe something, you get some data, and you run some regressions, and then you make some conclusions, you derive some correlations, okay? That's one method. That's the scientific method. That's the dominant method in mainstream academia today in the social sciences. But there's an alternative, forgotten methodology, which is the methodology used by Austrian economists. And that methodology is not the scientific method. By the way, the scientific methodology, according to Austrian economists and myself, is actually unscientific. Okay, because the scientific method is only applicable in the hard sciences, not in the social sciences. In the social sciences, an alternative methodology is called the deductive methodology. What is the deductive methodology? It's a methodology where rather than observing something, you do what? You, in introspection, you logically deduce, starting from a principle, you say this principle is valid, cannot be invalidated. If you try to deny its veracity, you end up verifying the principle, the axiom. From that, using valid arguments, you arrive at other principles. From this principle, you use valid arguments, you arrive at another principle. So this methodology is called the deductive methodology. The scientific methodology is called the inductive methodology, where you observe something and you derive conclusions from that. So two competing methodologies. Of course, we're going to support the deductive methodology. We're against data aggregations, observations, right? So let me give you a quick example of what it means, the difference between deductive and inductive. Let's say the price of apples go up. What happens to the quantity demanded? So price of apple is going up. Quantity demanded is going down. Do you need to observe this?
No.
Do you need to go to the supermarket, sit down, and watch people coming one by one and saying, oh, the price of apple went up, I'm not going to buy apples, I'm going to buy some oranges, some watermelon, right? Do you need to go in the supermarket, gather data, and then every time you change the price and then see what happened to demand? Do you need to do that? Or can you deductively, in your head, right, close your eyes and say, okay, if the price of a good goes up, quantity demanded goes down for two reasons. One of them is the expenditure effect. If I have $100, apples are $1 each, I can buy 100 apples. If the price of apple went up by $1, it's $2, I can buy 50 apples. Naturally, automatically, it's axiomatic. So quantity demanded goes down for the expenditure income reasons. Also, the quantity demanded goes down when the price of apple goes up because of the substitution effect. Instead of buying apples, I buy oranges. I buy watermelon, some other fruit, okay? So because of the income effect and the substitution effect, they work in unison to bring about a decline in the quantity demanded. I do not need to observe this. I don't need data analysis. Okay, so the deductive methodology is it's logical analysis given starting from a principle, a truthful axiom, we're able to derive other principles. And the alternative methodology is the inductive methodology. Now, the science that studies how you know what you know, right? The different varieties of methodologies of discovering what you know, what do we know, and how do we know what we know is called epistemology. Epistemology is the study of how do we know what we know. Okay, so it's a branch of philosophy that investigates the methods of acquiring knowledge. How do we acquire? How did we acquire this knowledge? Obviously, the two main categories: the inductive and deductive. How do we know what we know? How do we study our struggle, our human action? So again, our analysis is the investigation, all right, or the study of human action in the state of nature, given our human nature. Okay. So how do we know what we know? How do we study our struggle? Two dominant methodologies I mentioned: the deductive methodology and the inductive methodology. This is the Austrian School of Economics approach. It was started actually with Karl Menger, the deductive methodology, but Ludwig von Mises expanded on it. And the inductive methodology, which is the current dominant methodology in our analysis. So, what is the method with which we study our struggle? The deductive methodology. So the deductive methodology starts from a priori knowledge. So how do we start? How was Ludwig von Mises able to derive all economic principles and axioms from one principle, human action? So from human action, step by step, using valid arguments, was able to derive the entire spectrum of human behavior. He said starting from a priori knowledge. What does it mean, priori knowledge? Knowledge before our senses, before observation. Okay, so it's knowledge innate in us. Okay, so starting from a priori knowledge prior to observations, that is prior to observations, and proceed by deduction to uncover other truthful principles. So a priori knowledge is a knowledge that is self-evident. These are facts. These knowledge, self-evident knowledges, are facts about human beings, about human existence. Their truth is revealed not by observation or empirical or statistical analysis, but by introspection, reflection, contemplation. It's all these things that you are deducing in your head, and internal inspection rather than empirical research. What is the fundamental a priori knowledge with which we start our study of the implications of human beings in their struggle for survival is human action. Okay, so human action doesn't need empirical verification. You know that human beings act. Okay, it doesn't need a proof. Okay, it doesn't need a mathematical, scientific, statistical proof. Human beings act. We know that by introspection. Now, example of deductive methodology. All economic students at the Menger Institute are two-headed monsters. Yunji is an economic student at the Menger Institute. Therefore, if this is true, right, so think about this as being human action, it's a truthful axiom. Then from this, we're able to say Yunji is an economic student at the Menger Institute. Therefore, Yunji is a two-headed monster. If all the students in this classroom are two-headed monster, you're a student at the Menger Institute, therefore you're. That's a simple way of introducing the deductive methodology. Okay, it gets very complicated, by the way. Okay, it's like logic, or in philosophy, they use logic, and mathematics has logic, right? It can get complicated, right? It's not an easier science. Okay, a qualitative science is much more difficult than a quantitative science. I've done both. A third-rate mathematician can do quantitative science. Okay, a deductive science is much more difficult. So that's a simple example. Oops. Mises defined praxeology. So what is praxeology? Praxeology is the science of studying human action in its struggle for survival using a priori deductive methodology. Okay, praxeology is the science of studying human action in the state of nature, guided by our human nature, right? In its struggle for survival using a priori deductive methodology, right? So the word a priori stands for prior to observations, okay? Karl Menger was laid down the groundwork of praxeology, but it was Ludwig von Mises who formulated praxeology as a distinct science in human action. Just from the axiom of action, Mises was able to deduce an entire treatise on economics in 1881, right? 1881. You know how many pages is human action? I tell this to many people, they get shocked. 700? No. 881. Human action is 800. Where is human action? Somewhere in the other office. So it's 881 pages, okay? I don't know if it's coincidence or, you know. So according to praxeologists, economic propositions are not derived from observation. Economics theories are like those of logic and mathematics a priori. Economic propositions are not subject to continual empirical verifications on the ground of experience. You know, in the mainstream, using the scientific method, when you gather data, you run some regression analysis. Those of you are familiar with econometrics, you can never say, I accept the hypothesis. Okay, if I'm looking at a relationship, an interaction, price goes up, quantity demand goes down. If I use the scientific methodology, all I can say, I fail to reject the hypothesis. You can never say I accept that. So according to mainstream economics, there are no economic laws, right? There is economic outcomes that pertains to a particular space and time. In in the 1953 in Spain, when prices of bananas went up, quantity demand goes down, right? So that's unique in time and space, but it's not a law. It's not axiomatic because from data analysis, from statistics, you cannot derive axiomatic principles. All you can say there is a correlation that if the price goes up, quantity demand for bananas went down in Spain in 1953. But you can never say it is a law. So for mainstream economics, there are no economic regularities. This is where Karl Menger and Ludwig von Mises and the rest of the Austrians says, wait a minute, economics is free of time and space. Okay, it's universal. It is axiomatic. It is tautological. It's true any place, any time. The law of demand is true here on planet Earth, on planet Mars, 1,000 years from now, 1,000 years in the future. Okay, so the law of supply, the law of diminishing marginal utility, the law of returns to scale, and the rest of the economic principles and theories are not unique to a specific time and place, but they are universal. Okay, unfortunately, the scientific method doesn't give you that validity. It just says, oh, in this gathering data in Spain at the supermarket, this was the relationship. Okay, that's the historical school, the German historical school versus the Austrian deductive school. Economic propositions are not subject to continual empirical verification. I don't need to continually verify whether the law of demand is valid or universal, any place, any time. Okay. Economics is a pure science, more like applied logic. Okay, it's a pure science, more like applied logic. It is axiomatic, its laws are universal. So, inductive methodology. Inductive methodology. What is the inductive methodology? Scientific methodology, scientism, scientific. Okay, they call it's unscientific. Okay, the scientific methodology is unscientific. They say, oh, we have to observe, make observations, we have to gather some data, use some mathematical modeling and then or statistical modeling, and then test using our data with the help of econometrics, right? Some statistical approach. We have to aggregate data, obviously, to do that, right? Do we need to test the law of demand? No, obviously not. You don't need to test the law of demand. Do you need to test the law of comparative advantage or exchange or trade? No. If two people are trading, do you need to prove statistically, mathematically, with aggregation of data that they both benefit? No, it's intuitive. Otherwise, you wouldn't trade. Every single human being, by the time you got to this classroom, you've traded already. Your pencil, you traded, your paper, your shoes, your watch, right? Your hair gel, your soap that you used to shop. Everything you've traded hundreds, thousands of times already. Right? Trade is occurring every day, every moment, every second. I don't need testing. It's an empirical, it's like I don't need empirical analysis. See, right? So it should be deductively deduced. I don't need mathematical modeling. Consider the validation process. If two people engage in voluntary exchange, they must both benefit. Do we need empirical validation? No, it's intuitive. Whenever an exchange is not voluntary but forced, you need to measure it that one person is not happy or people are not happy. When it's coerced, no. It's not voluntary, it's involuntary, then I don't need empirical verifications. Both parties could be, by the way, hurt by voluntary or coerced exchange. Whenever the consumption of a unit increases by an additional unit, the value attached it decreases. This is the law of diminishing marginal utility. Do I need empirical verification? So think about it. I give you a unit of water, you drink it. I give you a second unit of water, you give it to your kids. The third unit, you give it to your plants. The fourth unit, you give it to your pets. Fifth unit, you play water games. Do I need to sit down and gather data, ask you which one gave you the highest utility? No, I don't, because I know that the first utility, the first unit, you're going to utilize it for the satisfaction of the highest strength preference that you have with respect to water, units of water, right? The first unit of water, you drink it. The second, you have a ranking, subjective to you. There's no objective, subjective to you, okay? So I know that the first unit, you're going to put it for the highest strength use. And the second, that's the law of diminishing utility. That means every additional unit of water, its utility is going down. That's axiomatic. Because of the scarcities of the world and the uncertainties of the future, the first unit that you get, you drink it. You don't play water, games with it. You don't give it to your pets, you drink it. Okay, so this is again axiomatic. I don't need observations. The list goes on, right? I can have hundreds of statements like this and show you that none of them require statistical mathematical analysis. It's just like deductive reasoning. Minimum wages. There was an article that was floating a few years ago, right? I was a faculty and I got this email says, oh, all the faculty, please sign up to Governor before Newsom. Who was the governor? You, California? Well, no, forgot. Who was the governor of California before Newsom? No?
I don't know.
Okay, anyways, so there was a petition to the governor.
Jerry Brown.
Huh?
Jerry Brown.
Jerry Brown. So there was a petition to Jerry Brown for what purposes? Minimum wage. They said, let's raise minimum wages. And the argument in the petition, it was sent to all PhD economists. And all PhD economists at my institution, okay, and other institutions in California, it was a petition at the state level, signed by many Nobel Prize winners. There was at least 4 or 5 Nobel Prize winners. Okay, there was hundreds of people, like the petition, and then obviously the people are signing up there in the hundreds and several hundreds, all signing saying what? To Governor Jerry Brown, raise minimum wage. That's fine. That's not the problem. But you know what it says underneath? It says data analysis or empirical analysis finds that minimum wages do not produce unemployment. Now let's analyze this. What is a minimum wage? So in the labor market, there is demand and supply. You're supplying labor, I am the employer. You supply labor. I'm hiring all of you. I have $100,000. There are 10 students here. I'm hiring you for $10,000. I'm spending 100,000. What happens if the price, your price goes up? Wages is like price of apples. When the price of apples or the price of labor goes up, do I hire more or less or indifferent? I hire less. First of all, I don't have money, my expenditure, right? As much as I was hiring. And number two, I will do what? Income and what effect? In the Apple case, you substitute it. In your case, I can substitute you with automation, robots, or I can bring a skilled worker that does the job of two unskilled workers. Okay, so the income effect and the substitution effect in the labor market is the same thing as in the market for apples. So my consumption or my employment of labor is going to go down. This is axiomatic. Now, how did this PhDs and Nobel Prize winners came up with a statement that said employment doesn't go down? So Jerry Brown, please raise the minimum wages. Data analysis is showing that employment is not going down. Obviously, there's something wrong in the data. Okay. When I did all kinds of this scientific work, I was a mainstream economist, obviously, at some point in my life. I have publications. Obviously, there's something called specification searches. You can drop outliers, data mining, right? I mean, you can do so many things to data sets that can literally generate the result that you want. Now, let's assume these are solid, loyal to their sciences, economists. What could be different? Well, maybe in the state of California or wherever this research, this data are they bringing from, right? So they're saying, oh, for example, in the state of New York, in Detroit, minimum wages went out. Data is saying that employment didn't go down. But were they able to hold everything else constant? Maybe in Detroit, there are other firms from another part of the US that came, they opened up business there. So that did what compensated for the reduction in employment due to increasing minimum wages. It's just more companies are coming in, they're hiring more people. Maybe that countered it. So how can you isolate that? How can you isolate all the actions that are taking place in Detroit? How can you know? It's impossible to know, right? All human actions. Maybe there is a flood in neighboring states and everyone is going to run to Detroit. So many things are changing that you cannot control for all else. Because you say, oh, we're controlling for everything else. Well, to control for everything else, you have to have hundreds, thousands of what? Other variables that you have to keep fixed. So you can identify, isolate minimum wages, but you can't keep everything else fixed. That's why their data outcome is showing minimum wages went up, employment didn't go down. Okay, but we know deductively, right, common sense logic, the income effect and the substitution effect that it will lead. So that's the difference between inductive and deductive methodology. Unfortunately, obviously, I didn't sign it. So this was a big, like all the faculty at my previous institutions, there's hundreds faculty, and it was like one group, going, and then. So obviously, I said I'm not signing this, and I gave this same argument, right? That I'm not signing this because of this reason. I don't. This study is not valid. It's a data analysis. It's an invalid approach. Obviously, I was crucified because everyone they wanted to raise minimum wages, right? All the faculty wanted to. They didn't listen to reason, to rationality. I was crucified. I was isolated. I was called names. I was ridiculed. I was marginalized. Okay, and you know the rest. When the quantity of money increases, the purchasing power of money will fall. Does this need verification? Is this hypothetical? Does it need statistical verification? No. When you have too much money, the number of apples is the same, 100 apples, and suddenly I double everybody's income. What happens to the price of apple? It also doubles. Not in the short run, but in the long run. Okay. So that's called inflation. Increasing the money supply is inflation. When you increase the money supply, what happens to prices? They go up. I don't need empirical analysis. It's deductive. Okay, it's axiomatic. So this. Oops. Now, so that's the deductive methodology. Okay. Now let's talk about some of the fundamental principles of praxeology. We know this fundamental. The starting point is human action. Now, human beings act with a purpose. Your purpose is to attain a goal. Your purpose is to attain a goal. Survival, consumption of the energies of life. Human action is not mechanical. Knee-jerk reaction, right? Is not. We don't study knee-jerk. We don't study people who are sleeping in a coma, walking, night walking, etc. We study purposeful action. Purpose. We're striving. We rank our preferences. When you wake up in the morning, you can go to point A, point B, point C. You don't just wake up going any direction. You do what? You rank your goals. Okay? You have a purpose, you rank your goals. How do you rank your goals? You say, I like goal number 1 over goal number 2 over no goal number. We call this ordinal ranking. You say, I prefer going to the movies 3.5 times more going to a basketball game. That's cardinal ranking. Do you rank your preferences cardinally? Do you say, I like him 6.13 times more than him? Or do you say, I like him more than him?
I like him more.
More. You don't, so there is no number attached to our preferences. That means our satisfaction is ordinally ranked. It's very important. Because later on, collectivists and socialists will justify redistribution based on cardinal ranking. That's what utilitarianism is. Utilitarianism. What is utilitarianism? The dominant philosophy in the world is utilitarianism. You know what utilitarianism is? The best policy is the policy that maximizes the satisfaction of the most number of people. Right? A policy is taken that makes the most number of people happy. That's utilitarianism. Well, how do you know the strength, right? How do you know that's taking $1 from a billionaire, giving it to a poor person, that your utility is going to go up more than the decline in my utility? Well, they use cardinal ranking, but that's not scientific. Under ordinal ranking, there's no difference from $1 to $2, or for me going down from my $1 billion minus $1. I cannot make interpersonal utility comparison based on ordinal ranking. So redistributive economists, socialist, collectivist, statist economists, they use cardinal ranking to justify redistribution. Okay, so these things are very important. Eventually, they're going to. But we know that scientifically speaking, our preferences are not all cardinally ranked, but they are ordinally ranked. All I can say, my satisfaction went up, your satisfaction went up. Okay. Subjective valuation. Who decides the value? Who decides my wages? Who decides the value of apples and oranges?
Everybody.
Everybody, how? Can you be more specific?
Millions of choices.
Millions of choices, people, millions of people. That's the price is determined, right? That's how by the interaction of millions of people. But when you talk about value, price is not value. It reflects value, but it's not value. Who decides the value of a Picasso painting? Picasso painting. It's worth, I think the last one got sold for $164 million. Who decided the value of a Picasso painting? The buyers, subjective to the individual. So I decide, you put a value. Does it reflect the cost of production? 164, does it reflect the amount of sweat or the amount of the brush and the paint? No. So value is subject. Human beings put a value on a good or a service, not the other way around.
It's like beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? You can't sell beauty. The buyer is seeing beauty in you. Because socialist collectivists, they would do what? They say, oh no, the value reflects the cost of production. The workers, they're sweating. So the price should go to the, if I'm paying $10, all that $10 should go to the workers because the workers are sweating their building. So when you sweat, you need compensation. That's socialism. But you can dig a hole in the desert. Nobody likes. Its value is zero. It doesn't matter how much you sweat. It doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter how much labor you use. Okay, it's irrelevant. No one will buy it. Okay, so value is determined on the production side, on the consumption side, rather than the production side. Again, very important when we talk about socialism and exploitation theory of Karl Marx, right? They argue that value is the labor theory of value, and the workers need compensation, and the price is not going to the workers. Therefore, the capitalist pigs, they're extracting all the profits, right? From the exchange, and they're keeping it, and the workers are not being compensated for their effort. Okay, what they're forgetting is the role of the entrepreneur, who actually does what? Sees the future, takes risks. He knows something has value or doesn't have value. Only the entrepreneur takes that risk. What is the worker labor doing? Labor. We celebrate Labor Day. Okay, we should celebrate Entrepreneurship Day. What is labor? Idle, doing nothing, playing backgammon in the alley. Now I'm sweating, I'm building an empire, I'm building a resort, I'm taking all the risks, all the money I'm inputting, uncertainties about the future, the risk, doing all the labor for years to come. Then I built a resort. Then I'm going to hire somebody sitting at the corner playing backgammon, doing nothing. And suddenly I'm going to celebrate Labor Day. Okay, their time is gone. Okay, robots are going to take over like unskilled. Like you have to skill yourself, you have to elevate yourself, you have to compete. You know, it's called co-evolution, right? Technology is moving forward, like labor has to catch up with it. And then, it goes in tandem in a free market environment, by the way. Don't ever think that it's going to take over, people are going to be, they don't going to have jobs. No, economy is not suicidal. It doesn't kill itself. The only time maybe the economy, like technology, moves at a faster rate than the labor catch up with it is when there is cheap money. When the government lowers the interest rate, then you have people borrowing money, and technology is moving at a faster rate than the evolution of this, workers from, more and becoming more and more skilled. So there is a discrepancy. Now you have unemployment, you have tensions, you have struggles. Okay. Otherwise, it will grow in tandem. And as a matter of fact, when technology is growing, robots are producing all the goods and services, prices will go down. Okay, you don't need to work. Literally, you can walk in, a robot. How much does it take to produce a dentist today? How much time and effort? You want to become an orthodontist? You have to go 10 years to school and cost, right? If not more to produce. In the future, with a click of a button, we're going to produce 100,000 orthodontists. Robots, you're just going to go, and they don't get tired. 24 hours, they can go, you can get your teeth fixed, and then you can get out. And the cost is going to be marginal because the variable cost is going to go down. The most important cost is the fixed cost. When you spread it out to millions of them, then its marginal cost is literally zero. So human beings, we're never going to sweat for sustenance. Today we're sweating. Like I'm sweating to go to the Starbucks, pick up a cup of coffee. I'm sweating for my lunch. We sweat, right? Food is expensive. Never again in the near future, human beings will sweat for sustenance. There's going to be plenty of apples and oranges for everyone. Our interest is going to be metaphysical issues, intergalactic transportation, discovering the origin of the universe. We're going to have different purposes, okay, than sustenance. That age is gone. Question.
I've never heard socialists discuss the self-employed entrepreneur, self-employed laborer, the orthodontist who opens his own practice, or the guy who's like pushing a taco cart and like choosing a location. Like he's working for himself. He's a laborer, but he's also the owner, the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
They don't talk about that.
No, they don't. There's the absence of entrepreneur. As a matter of fact, I mean, even forget the socialists, even mainstream economics today, pick up any textbook. Okay? Any textbook. Okay, whether it's this textbook, these are all the economics mainstream texts. None of them has a chapter on entrepreneurship. They're statists. There's no difference between mainstream USA academia and socialism or collectivism. It's the same, one and the same. It's a matter of degrees, right? It's not a qualitative change. Not a single chapter on entrepreneurship. Labor this, labor that, and then there's the capitalist. And then they differentiate a capitalist and a labor. When you do that, you pit two groups against each other. So you can do what? Control the situation, right? Pit one group. But who's a capitalist and who's a labor? I am both. As long as you have $1 in the bank, 90 cents of it is being invested. Technically, you're a capitalist. Your money is being utilized. I'm a worker, a producer, and a consumer. It's like producers, consumers. They pit them against each other. But I'm both. I'm producing lectures and I'm consuming coffee and cookies, right? So human beings, not one group versus another. It's like you're everything. Now you're consuming information, you're a consumer, but you'll be producer when you graduate. Okay. Now you don't have money, you're borrowing money to go to school to start your business. Later on in your life, you're gonna actually lend money. You're gonna accumulate. So it's a temporal changes that are happening in the progress of our lives, right? So diminishing marginal utility, we talked about this, right? So praxeology is right. This is an implication of praxeology. Efficiency, human being, we're efficient because of the scarcities and the uncertainties and the risks that we're taking. So our action is targeted towards being efficient. Non-satiation, I call it greed, but then my friend over there always, doesn't like the word greed. So I'm using non-satiation or greed. It's the fact that you are pursuing an end means that you prefer having it than not obtaining. You're never satiated. What does it mean, satiation? You're never content, fulfilled. Why? It's axiomatic. It's not metaphysical. It's axiomatic. Because I have to act. And if I act, I have to act with a purpose. And when I'm acting with a purpose, that means I have to rank my goals. Will you ever take in your life a step towards losing or versus gaining? So every action must be gainful. Gainful could be self-sacrificing, whatever, but subjectively it's gainful. Okay? So helping other people doesn't mean that's not gainful to you. The reason I'm helping him is not because of him. I don't care about him. But it gives me the warm glow. And this is biologically proven fact. Your body releases endorphins. You get the happy feeling. If he's struggling and I don't support him, I call it. No one has come. This is my definition. I call it warm glow. Cold flow, which is the opposite of warm glow. Cold flow, your heart started palpitating and you get shortness of breath. You've seen someone struggle and you're not helping. And number three, there is a genetic overlap. The closer you are to me, to my tribe, to my family, the more the genetic overlap. The further you are, still genetic overlap. Still my genetic overlap can go to the other kingdoms, right? So because of these reasons, number four is the division of labor is getting deeper and deeper. There are benefits. I don't want him to struggle. He's a third party. It could be my neighbor, or it could be in another part of the world. I don't want him to struggle because he might be the founder of a cancer skills, a drug that kills cancer cells. Right? He could be a promoter, a musician. He could be. So there is always the deeper the division of labor, the more interdependent and interconnected we're becoming. There are many reasons I want to help him. Okay, but so nevertheless, so including all of this is that every action must be gainful. So every action I cannot not act, and every action must be gainful. Therefore, I can never be satiated. I can never sit and say I'm done. You can never be done. You climb Mount Everest. The next day you want to go into the deepest of the trenches, the Mariana Trench, right off of the coast of Philippines. So we're never satiated. Okay, you want to call greed or satiation? That's up to you, but I call it non-satiation. Methodological individualism is the fact that only individuals act. Society doesn't act. Okay, for an economist, France attacked Germany. What does that mean? Only individuals act. Society doesn't act. We study human action. Okay. There is a department at my previous institutions, the Department of Critical Theory and Social Justice. The department. You get a bachelor's degree. Critical theory, and so is there uncritical theory? A big word, means nothing. Okay. Critical theory, you get a 4-year school, and social justice. Why are we socializing justice? Each individual experiences justice uniquely. Somebody comes in, slaps all of us, he may on the cheek, he may punch him back, you may shake his hand, he might kill him, he might throw him off the balcony. Different people, their justice is unique to them. Why are we socializing it? What happened to individual justice? It's okay. Critical theory, big name, critical theory and social justice, inflation, A's, everybody gets A's, okay, in their courses. Fake courses, there is a dozen of them. Don't fall into the trap of majoring, into this type. Anything that ends with studies, stay away from it. It creates no value in the marketplace, zero value, okay? Ends and means. Obviously, in order to attain our ends, we use means. In economics, in economics, resources that we're using, capital, labor, land, right, to attain our goals. Time preference. Human action, we prefer the now versus the future. Why? We prefer the now versus, it's called the time preference theory. Why do human beings prefer the now versus the future? Because we are mortal. Because the future is unknown. Because there is risk and uncertainty into the future. You know the difference between uncertainty and risk? Risk has a distribution, probability distribution. That's risk. Uncertainty is above and beyond. It doesn't have a distribution. Okay? Risk has a distribution, uncertainty. So if the future is unknown, there are uncertainties of risk. That's why we have credit cards. Everyone has a credit card. Why? Because you don't want to wait. You want to buy the car today, you want to buy the house today, right? You don't want to wait 10, 20 years. We all have credit cards, so we want the now versus the future, because you don't know the future, okay? That gives rise to what? In the money market, that gives rise to time value of money, which is in the bank. When you borrow money, you pay interest rate. So the time preference theory, which is a direct implication of human action, gives rise to interest rates. Interest rates. Okay, interest rate reflects what? Time preference. You're not consuming today, you're going to consume a year from now, but you better get more in a year from now than now, okay? You prefer the now versus the, so that waiting period is what the interest rate is. Uncertainty and risk. Action always takes place under uncertainty. This gives rise to entrepreneurship. So the idea of an entrepreneur is deduced from the axiom of action. Entrepreneurship, there is a role, entrepreneurial role. This is the end for the first lecture, so let's take 5 minutes break, okay? And then I'll come back and finish methodology. And then I'll see you later on. We'll talk about trade and the money. Okay, so let's take a break and we'll see you in 5-10 minutes.
There's a comment on Zoom.
Oh, okay.
So Jeff is saying, in ordering our goals, you distinguish between ordinal ranking and another type of ranking, but I did not understand the word. Was it cardinal ranking? And if so, what is cardinal ranking?
So cardinal ranking, when there are numbers associated with it. When you say you prefer an apple 3 times more than you prefer a banana, right? So when you put numerical values, then that would be a cardinal ranking. An ordinal ranking is just, I prefer apples over bananas.
Numerical values on your preference.
If you put numerical values on your preference, that's ordinal ranking.
No.
Sorry, cardinal. So if you put numerical values, that's a cardinal ranking. And I'm saying that cardinal ranking is not the correct way to rank your preferences. Okay? You cannot say I prefer apples 3.13 times more than bananas. You can just say I prefer an apple over a banana. But how many times? There's no measure. Even if it's subjective, but it doesn't manifest itself in the marketplace. Okay? Think about love. Okay, I love you 3 times more than her. What does that mean? Okay, you cannot love someone 3 times more than the other one. What's the measuring stick that you're using? You only say I love this one more than this person.
How do they justify the cardinal ranking if they can't?
Because they redistributive purposes. Well, they put when they have the utility in different curves, they put numerical values and they justify it. Later on, towards the last pillar, actually, we'll talk about cardinal ranking and the redistribution, etc. Okay. Okay, so let's take a break.